Welcome to part 4 of the RCA sound cartridge series. In the first 3 episodes, I made a bunch of electronic repairs to our 60-year-old player. If you missed those episodes, you may want to go back and check them out. In this episode, I'll show the final fixes and reassemble the player. Stay tuned to the end for high-quality demonstrations of the player's audio. You'll hear several recordings made with the included microphones, 2 of which are in stereo. One of a really special and one of a really head-scratching moment with my family. And you'll hear a fascinating music showdown comparing the sound cartridge player's audio to a digital file. Everything was captured directly from the player's line outputs, so use a pair of high-quality headphones or speakers to get the full effect. But first, let's finish our repairs. Our last episode ended with a bang. Well, I'm sorry to say, but you guys just missed the fireworks. Actually, because of my own stupidity, I didn't have the camera rolling when this electrolytic went bang. And also because of my own stupidity, I failed to put a capacitor in here that was apparently up to the job voltage-wise. This is one of the 2000 microfarad capacitors, and with the original, it was rated for 16 volts. And the 2 that I've used here are also rated for 16 volts. Now I know there's about 12.7 volts running through this circuit, and I should have known that 16 volts just isn't enough of a safety margin. These other 2 capacitors are rated for 25 volts, and those should be just fine. So I'm going to pull these 2 16 volt 2000 microfarad electrolytics now and see if we can find replacements that are at least 25 volts. Okay, here's a closer view of our exploded electrolytic. You've seen exploded diagrams before, but this is the real thing. So let's take advantage of this opportunity to see how these electrolytics are built. You can see there's a foil here that wraps around like a Tootsie Roll. Let's unravel that. There you go. And you can see there are several layers of insulators and conductive material. You can see that one lead connects to this end of the conductive material and this lead to the other. And I searched the room and I was able to find the outer body of the capacitor. This blew clear across the room like a bullet, so I'm very fortunate that I didn't get hurt. Okay, let me see if I can find some capacitors that are better suited for the job. I installed the new 35 volt capacitors thinking that would solve the problem, but as I was testing this out, I noticed they were getting very hot. Additionally, even these were showing signs of possibly exploding as the bottoms here were starting to bulge out. Now these are good quality Nichicon capacitors, so I knew something was wrong. So I dug out the schematic, and upon closer inspection, I realized that this amplifier uses a positive common, not a negative one. Now this is not only completely different from the way the rest of the player is designed, it's also different from any other device I've ever encountered. So here you can see this black wire I assumed was negative, but it's actually positive. And the red, green, and blue wires are actually negative. So each of these capacitors has been installed backwards. No wonder we had one explode. Note though that the electrolytic we replaced on this board is actually installed correctly, as the capacitor that we replaced was clearly marked. Now I guess you could say that the filter capacitor that we replaced was clearly marked as well, because we can see here that it does state that the common is positive and that it is the black wire. That's pretty unusual, so I think I can be forgiven for this mistake. However, I actually made another mistake that's not quite so excusable. You can see that the terminal strip is going to contact the magnet of the speaker. So not only do I need to flip all these capacitors, I also need to reposition this terminal strip so we're a little closer to the edge. And that may indeed mean that I need to remove this clip. Okay, let me see what I can do to clean up this mess.
I'm as richy as I can be, 'cause I never take her noise when I take my sugar to tea.
Okay, as you can hear, I finally got the outboard solid-state amp working with our replacement filter capacitors. I've wired them correctly now at the positive ground, and everything sounds loud and clear, and that buzz is all gone. Now, when I first oriented this terminal strip, not only did I have the polarities wrong for the electrolytics, it was also interfering with the magnet from the speaker, which sits right about in here. So I really needed to push this terminal strip as close to this edge as possible. And to do that, I had to remove this clip, which was in place to hold the original electrolytic. It was held in place by a rivet, which I drilled out, and you can see on the other side, this hole here where the rivet was in place. Now in the previous video, I indicated that the terminal strip needed to be oriented in a diagonal fashion to take advantage of these existing holes. But with the strip oriented even with a slight diagonal, it was interfering with the magnet. So to orient it parallel to this edge and use the existing holes, I just opened up the hole a little bit on the foot of one side of the terminal strip. And that really worked out well. So overall, I'm very pleased with the way this worked out, despite some very embarrassing hiccups. Now at this point, I have managed to collect a few other of these players. I now own 1 mono unit and 3 stereo units. Now one of the stereo units I purchased was supposedly all restored. However, on closer inspection on the work that was done, that's really not the case. For example, let's compare the way I replaced the filter capacitors on the outboard amp to the way it was done on this supposedly restored one. Let me just disconnect this speaker so I can show you. And I hope you'll agree with me that this is just completely unacceptable. Not only did they not use new capacitors and instead opted for these old vintage ones, you can see the sloppy way in which everything was soldered and all these exposed wires. And worst of all, the whole thing is held together with tape. Let's unravel this and take a closer look. Yeah, this is about the worst recap job I've ever seen in my life. Again, old capacitors. And even the small ones look vintage. These don't look new at all. So for me, this is a prime example of how not to do things. I'll give them credit though, unlike me, at least they used the positive ground. Still, I'm going to have to completely redo this. Now the reason I bring this other player up is because even though it wasn't restored electrically very well, the cosmetic condition of this player is much better than the one that I've been working on. Let me show you, for example, the differences between the cover, which contains this outboard amp and speaker. This is the cover for the player which we've been working on. And this is the cover from the player which is in better cosmetic condition. You can see in this one a lot of the gold metallic paint is still intact, whereas this one is just sort of an orangey mess. This one also has the very cool looking RCA emblem intact, whereas this one has fallen off and is nowhere to be found. Looking at the front labels, you can see on this one I've had to remove the metal plate. It was badly corroded and I made an attempt to clean it, but you can see it didn't work out so well. Now compare that to this one with a near perfect metal faceplate. Let's flip these over now and I'll show you there's a difference with the speaker as well. I had showed you earlier the one that we're restoring had some rust around the speaker. Compare that to the one in this cabinet where the speaker is in really perfect shape, no signs of corrosion whatsoever. And even looking at the metal latch and the metal hinges, you can see these are badly rusted. Whereas on this one, nice and shiny, really no rust at all. Now the reason I bought so many of these players is that the one I'm restoring cosmetically is pretty wanting. And by purchasing other players, I was hoping I'd be able to put together one near perfect looking player. In this restoration, instead of using the cover that came with the unit, we're going to use this better quality one. Now my goal is to restore all 4 players that I have, but I want one that's in really ideal condition. So now I'm going to put the cover assembly back together using my electrically restored chassis with this cabinet and speaker. Let me get to work. Okay, I've got the player all put back together, and I think it looks great. All things considered, I think it sounds pretty great too. I've demonstrated for you the quality of playback through its speakers a little, but now I want you to really hear what the player is capable of. To do this, the following demonstrations will all be done using the direct audio outputs from the player. Now, I've often called this a player, but it's also capable of recording. In fact, it's recording my voice right now using one of the included microphones. But I'm also recording using this modern digital microphone plugged directly into the camera, and so far that's what you've been listening to. Let's now listen to the recording quality of our RCA cartridge player. When I edit this video, I'm going to switch to its audio output. Now, hear the difference? I'll bet you do. During recording, the volume control switches to a level control. As I turn it back and forth, notice how the levels decrease and increase. Also notice the very cool display tube, which gives a visual indication of levels. The goal is to set levels so that the display bars be as closely as possible during the peaks without overlapping too much. At the end of this video, I'll demonstrate and compare the recording quality using some high-fidelity music, so definitely stay tuned for that. But first, I want you to hear the recording quality using both included microphones in stereo. Back in the day, a player like this was probably used often to capture fun family moments, and I've been doing the same. My 90-year-old mother-in-law lives with us, and she suffers from Alzheimer's. Recently, I captured this exchange with her, my wife, and myself. She broke into song, and we now all treasure this recording. Take a listen. No, you talk into it.
Hello, how do you do?
You were singing earlier. What were you singing? You were singing a song.
Sing a song. Let it ring the whole night long. I don't know the words.
I don't either. Don't look at me.
As long as I'm heard.
As long as you're heard.
Oh, good, Ma.
Sing a little more. The recording level was a little high. Try it now.
Sing a song.
Make it happy.
Sing it loud.
Make it
all night
sure.
long.
Your
Sing
voice
and
is
sing
hurting my
more.
ears.
It's okay if
But
I
we love
just
you anyway.
say my own words.
Da da da.
Sing,
No,
sing along. Sing it now for the whole night long. It's not good enough for anyone else to hear. Just sing a song. La 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 la. La 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 la. Sing a song. Sing it now the whole night long. Don't worry if it's not good enough for anyone else to hear. Just sing a song. Pretty good.
Wow, that was really good. You guys really pulled it together at the end there. Very, very nice.
All right,
Wow.
let's listen to that.
Let's listen to that. Yeah, that was sweet. Nicely done, girls. And now for something completely different. My teenage daughter had some friends over recently, and I was curious what would happen if I let them loose with the recorder. Well, they also broke into song. A very, very different type of song than the one my mother-in-law chose. Take a listen.
Hello.
Testing.
Testing.
Ooh,
Testing. 1, 2. Hello. Testing. 1, 2, 3. Are we gonna sing it?
Yeah, we should.
Okay.
Dropped out, I was 17, wasting all my money mixing dope and LSD. Man, Mama said don't get ahead of me, but I don't wanna finish college, I got hella dreams. Well, I don't know what's gotten into me.
dropped out. Yeah, by break-ins. His only song. Yeah.
It's a real life plan, right?
Yeah, it is.
It's like your
One
guidebook,
song.
basically.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah,
17.
so
Time
that's
to
what
drop out.
Amelia's parents
Yeah.
and your parents have to look forward to
Yeah,
in the next
exactly.
10 years. Good to know. Good to know. Great. You want to hear it? Here we go. Okay then. They're good kids, really. Now let's hear how well the player records music. In the following sequence, I'll play a song and switch the audio from the digital version to the RCA player's recorded version. I'll do this every 10 seconds or so you can compare. Here we go. It starts with the digital version playing first. Well, what did you think? As you can hear, the player is capable of high-fidelity recording. It's got bass, it's got treble, it's got stereo. And when casually listening, it's acceptable. But when we compare it to the digital file, we immediately have the limitations of this portable 60-year-old recorder thrown in our face, or in our ears. The tape saturation, reduced separation, lack of dynamics, and limited frequency response are all too apparent. The RCA player's specifications boast a 30 to 15,000 Hz frequency response. I didn't test this, but I'm certain there's a big roll-off at the ends of those frequencies. So, while good for the time, clearly this player wasn't up to the best that consumer reel-to-reel machines were capable of in the early 60s. I don't own one of those machines for comparison, but based on my research, this is certainly the case. I do own this 1970s Pioneer deck. An unfair comparison, I know, but that will make recordings that are nearly indistinguishable from the original. That's not to say that I'm in any way disappointed with this machine. Honestly, it's one of the most fascinating devices I've come across and is a definite favorite in my very large collection of antique sound equipment. I'm absolutely enamored with this thing, and in addition to the 4 players I now own, I've managed to collect 102 cartridges. 7 of those are pre-recorded music cartridges, a few are blanks, and the rest are full of recordings made by people all across the country decades ago on a machine just like this. Some are family recordings, some are recordings of broadcasts, and some are amateur recordings of music played at church or in private. Lately, I've been going through the collection looking for the best moments that are suitable for sharing, and in upcoming videos, I'll have those available to you. Stay tuned.
To stay updated, please subscribe to my channel and click the bell to receive notifications when I release new videos. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. I'll see you soon.